Hello and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. You might notice that I'm in different surroundings right now. I'm actually on the road, and one of the things I plan to do is to watch some of the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial in person. So if the audio and video is a little off, well, I don't have my usual recording set up here. I will be streaming some thoughts afterwards, so you can tune in to check that out. But one of the things I hope that this trial raises some awareness of is the complexity of domestic violence and some of the gendered implications of it, particularly when we're talking about male victims of domestic violence. As a society, we have a lot of stereotypes, and one of those stereotypes is that in domestic violence situations, men are always the aggressor and women are always the victim. And that's not always true. And we're seeing that with the Depp and Heard trial. A lot of people are becoming aware of what's going on there and watching this and are very much concerned that Johnny Depp appears to be the victim in all of this, and that his situation seems to be a great injustice as a result. Now, we haven't seen the full results of the trial yet. That's still pending, but my assessment when watching it is that Ms. Heard has some very serious credibility issues, that her testimony is very difficult to believe, and Johnny Depp appears to be quite believable. And his account of what he suffered is quite heart-wrenching, in the sense of, losing a finger is a serious thing. Having a cigarette ashed out on his face is horrific violence, assuming that that's true. So one of the problems we run into is that this stereotype can lead to difficulties for male victims in terms of getting support. One of the things that I will point out is that there are a number of women's shelters in most cities, but in many cities, male victims fleeing domestic violence, their options for shelter is often the homeless shelter, which is not a great place. Homeless shelters are often very difficult places to live. There's a lot of mental illness. There can be violence. So it can be a situation where people are have a very difficult time, especially if they have children, because you can't flee with your children to a homeless shelter. No parent is really going to want to take their kids and put them in a homeless shelter. So that is a factor that leads a lot of men to stay in relationships that they might otherwise leave. If leaving is going to endanger your children, people will stay through a lot. The other thing is that we have a sort of stereotypical notion that, a man can't be abused because on average men are stronger and bigger and so forth. Well, the first thing is that averages are just averages. That doesn't mean that that's the case for every relationship. But also, domestic violence doesn't really hinge on these kinds of size differences. Domestic violence isn't like a bar fight. It's not something where both sides are throwing punches and the bigger, more skilled combatant wins. There's a lot of relationship dynamics that go into them. And a lot of men are reluctant to use force in their own defense in these situations. I have seen military trained people who are muscular and large and could win a fight in a bar fight any time, but when they were victims of domestic violence, they just stood there and took the hits because they didn't want to swing back. They had cultural notions about that. But the other thing is that these stereotypes can make it very dangerous legally for people to swing back. If a guy has been punched repeatedly in the face and throws one back, he's probably going to end up in jail. And this is another thing that very much weighs into that. The legal system is very much leaned into these stereotypes for the most part. Now that's changing a little bit. We are seeing more police and more prosecutors who are aware of some of these issues, and I'm hoping that some of the coverage of the Depp and Heard trial is going to make that even more, on people's minds. But it is something to consider, especially because men are often a victim of a sort of different form of abuse, which is abuse via the legal system, using the legal system itself as a weapon. And in the Depp and Heard case, we can also see using sort of popular opinion as a weapon. Somebody can go and cause tremendous damage through a whisper campaign. If you tell all of somebody's friends that they're a wife beater, they're going to suffer some tremendous social consequences, whether or not that's true. And by the time you can sort of sort that out, you can't repair your reputation, especially because for most people, there just isn't really a way to do it. If you win at the trial, the verdict is not guilty, not innocent. And so a lot of people are going to watch these trials and say, oh, well, they had a good lawyer, or they got off on a technicality, or the court system is biased against victims, and not realize that in fact the person who is wrongly accused may be a victim. They may be somebody who is suffering. I have seen people be arrested as, the abuser in contexts where they suffered much worse harm. I've seen people arrested who went into custody with stab wounds in their back. Now, how do you get a stab wound in your back as the aggressor? Because that's clearly not a defensive reaction. It's really hard to stab somebody in the back defensively. This is all part of this sort of stereotypical notion. And another thing that is just very difficult for a lot of male victims is the social isolation, because there just isn't a lot of support. Many people will look at male victims and have very little sympathy. They may be disbelieving, or they may just be like, well, you're less of a man because you let a woman beat you. And that is a notion that we should really throw out as a society. People, can be victims. And similarly, men and women are not so different. They're not entirely different creatures. All of the evils that we ascribe to men can be also found in women. Women are not some unusual specimen that is lacking in some way of the rest of human emotions. It's not that there isn't this giant gulf. Women get angry. Women, may want revenge if they feel they've been wronged. All of these things can happen. And so we really need to discard these stereotypes. We need to consider the possibility that, when we have a relationship where there's conflict, that we may not necessarily know who the primary aggressor is, and we may not necessarily understand what's going on unless we do some real digging. And that can't happen so long as the sort of knee-jerk response is just to arrest or blame the male partner in this. As I mentioned, the Johnny Depp trial has been a real eye-opener for a lot of people to see a specific example, a real tangible example where it seems that this is going on. But of course, we never really know for sure. We can watch this trial and we can make our own conclusions, and we can feel really sure about it. I am pretty confident as to what was going down there, at least so far, and that could change as we see more evidence in this trial, but so far I'm feeling pretty confident. But I wasn't there. I don't know for certain. And that makes this all very, very challenging. But I do kind of want to end on a little bit of audio here, because I think it's really telling. And it really illustrates how sometimes you'll see these stereotypes are used as a weapon against men, as a way of further victimizing and isolating them. So let's have a little look here. I'm just going to bring up this clip here. Hopefully we can hear it.
Tell people that it was a fair fight and see what the jury and judge think. Tell the world, Johnny. Tell them, Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp, man, I'm a victim too of domestic violence, and yes. It's a fair fight. And see how many people believe or side with you.
And what did you say in response when Miss Heard said, tell the world, Johnny, tell them Johnny Depp, Johnny Depp, a man, I'm a victim too of domestic violence?
I said, yes, I am.
I mean, that really sums it up. And I think that it's hard to listen to that. I find that very difficult to listen to, because I have had many experiences of, of men who are perhaps powerful in society or physically powerful and who are just in tears in my office because they're suffering from, they've been abused physically and then they're further being abused by the judicial system. I will note as well, we don't know how prevalent it is that men are victims. I see it when they come as clients, when they've been harmed in some, when they have been blamed, but the evidence suggests that they're actually the victim of things. And, sometimes you can find that in files. But, they're not reporting typically what's going on. And so we don't know how much abuse is actually happening behind the scenes and unnoticed. Hospitals are trained to watch for signs of domestic violence, but those signs may not be as clear and may not be as well understood when we're talking about male victims. Male victims may have a much easier time in covering for those injuries, saying, oh, I got this playing sports, or oh, I got this, I was injured at work, or something along those lines, and thereby defraying suspicion. So this is a complicated subject, and as I really don't want people using this as an opportunity to try to devalue the victimization of women or indeed any other victims of domestic violence, because certainly women are victims as well. And what I'm hoping to convey here is that the sphere of people who are potentially victims is larger than what we think as a society, and that sometimes we have to go a little bit beyond what seems to be the easy answer in order to figure out what actually was happening. So hopefully we'll see that in the Depp and Heard trial. As I said, I'm going to be watching it. I'll be going live on stream afterwards to tell you some of my thoughts. In particular, I'm going to be watching the jurors and seeing sort of what their reactions are, because I think that's one thing that so far we've been unable to offer as part of the commentary, is what does it look like the jurors are thinking. But so stay tuned for that. Hopefully you'll check that out. And this is a really difficult topic. I very much encourage, please, comment if you have thoughts, but be decent to each other in the comments, okay? I mean, this is tough, and some people who are navigating this trial right now and watching it are people who have very serious victimhood experiences. So please be gentle with each other and be decent and good. And and please like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to see more content. I think this is a really important topic and one that that really needs more attention. I also want to thank my Patreon supporters at the $50 level, Canada's National Firearms Association, and the CCFR and the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, at the $30 level, Sights and Arms Limited and Marc Lebier Demour, and at the $20 level, Mick Tain, Mark, Jane Baben Luxor, Haywire, Dale Nesbitt, Cameron Johnson, Bruno R., Andrew Elsich, and The Liquor. Thank you as well to all of the $10 supporters who will be in the crawl immediately following. Thank you for watching. I hope this has armed you with knowledge, and stay tuned. I will have some more commentary on this. I also want to talk about that recent Supreme Court decision on intoxication. There's been a lot of coverage in the media, and a lot of it, as usual, is not super accurate. But right now I'm on the road, and so it's going to be hard to get through and do a really proper in-depth analysis. But it is on my agenda, as well as I want to do some commentary on the Wortman inquiry, that whole thing. There's a whole lot of topics I want to get to, but those will be coming. So stay tuned, and see you next time.